Hey everyone, Loomis here, and I am back with my final Ancient Call preview guide, the guide to Jormungandr. Now, Jormungandr is a giant snake, and similar to Fenrir, he has two phases that we'll call the odd phase and the even phase. So on the odd phase, every time you attack him, he will inflict a debuff that we'll call Venom. Now, Venom will last 2 to 3 turns depending on the phase, and what it does is that every time you attack or move or whatever at the end of your turn, it will inflict 20% of Jorm's attack as fixed damage at the end of your respective turn. So let's say you attack him, you'll get the fixed damage at the end of the turn. Even if you wait, you'll get the fixed damage at the end of your turn. So you just need to watch out for that. It also increases the AoE damage you take by 50%, so this is important to remember. And it's stackable, non-dispellable, but you can be immune to it. So this is one interesting mechanic on this fight where you can actually cheese it by, stacking a bunch of immune to fixed damage. So that's just a very interesting wrinkle on this fight. And every turn he will do a 0.3x map-wide AoE. So basically that's why you don't want to get too many stacks of Venom, or you want to manage your stacks of Venom, because you'll get hit by an AoE every turn, and later in the fight this can start to hurt a lot. Now, his first skill is going to be a 3x5 square line AoE that deals damage and applies a stack of Venom. And if there's no directions with more than one unit, Jorm will just normal attack. And one thing you'll notice is that on this fight, basically all of his attacks pretty much can be cheesed if you position yourself correctly. So this makes Jorm potentially the easiest fight because it has a very smooth progression through the fight, and you can basically just have him single attack you the entire fight and not have to worry about the giant AoEs or any of his special skills. So his second skill is a 7x2 line AoE dealing damage and also applying a stack of Venom. And again, if he cannot find a direction with more than one unit, he will just normal attack. And then he has a passive active all the time that he'll deal 500% more damage if there are less than 3 units within 3 squares. So since all Ancient Call fights pretty much are just DPS races, you should always have 3 units within 3 squares, and this will not come into play until basically the end of the fight when your units start dying because you don't have 3 units. And then his attack order is he's going to do a normal attack first, then skill 1, then skill 2. So this is a lot different than the other bosses as well, because often the bosses, their order is skill 1, skill 2, skill 3. So he'll be doing a bunch of normal attacks, which also makes Jormungandr a little bit easier. And so next we have the even phase. So on the even phase, he has his perk on this will be anytime you attack with a melee hero, he will get a buff that will reduce melee damage by 80%, and vice versa with ranged damage. So if you attack him with a melee hero, he'll have the melee damage reduction. So you want to attack with a ranged hero, obviously, and then you'll switch to a range reduction. So you'll want to flip-flop between melee and ranged. And only one buff can be active, so he can't have both melee and range damage reduction up at the same time, so that's why you flip-flop. And you're not able to change your attacking type through, Extreme Magic Bow, Clothesline, or whatever. So let's say you have a Joshua with Extreme Magic Bow. Every time you attack with him, it's always going to be ranged, even if you attack from melee range. So just something you have to watch out for there. And all of his odd phase perks still apply, so he's still going to apply Venom as he does in the odd phase. Now, his first skill here is a 5 times damage single target attack, which is very strong. 5 times, yes. And if no one's in range, the skill will just go into cooldown, and he will normal attack instead. The second skill is the exact same as the odd phase, and again, if he can't find a direction with more than one unit, he will just regular attack. And then passive, he has the same passive. And the attack order this time, though, is normal attack, skill 1, skill 2. So he's going to do 2 normal attacks in a row, which is very interesting. And the one important thing to note is that Jormungandr is always standing on a forest tile. So he's going to have a permanent 20% defense boost throughout the entire fight, which is a lot different than the other bosses because Jormungandr will always have a terrain advantage. So very important to note. So in terms of unit selection, the 2 factions that have the 100% stat boost are going to be the Origin faction and the Meteor faction. And in terms of team composition, I would recommend that because you have to, in the even phase, flip between melee and ranged attacking, you want to bring 2 melees and 2 ranged. That sounds pretty straightforward. Next, you'll definitely want a healer, and I call the 6 slot a flex, but, let's be honest, you're probably going to want another healer. So, in terms of melee choices, the best choice, in my opinion, for this fight is going to be Juggler. And in terms of skills, you're going to want to bring Battle Cry, Master of Ice, and Great Dragon Barrier. And the reason why I think he's the best unit for this fight is that he's the only way through Master of Ice that you can have Jorm stop being on a forest tile. Because Master of Ice changes all the tiles within a range into water tiles, the forest tile Jormungandr is standing on is suddenly now water. And he no longer has the 20% damage, the 20% defense boost. So, Juggler is very important for this fight, just for that reason alone. And obviously having Great Dragon Barrier is another big thing because it makes you immune to fixed damage for a period. But if you're running more than 4 fixed damage immunities, you might not need Great Dragon Barrier. And obviously if you're running more, you also might not need it. So it really kind of depends on your team composition. If you're not running Great Dragon Barrier, I'd probably recommend Beast Shock, I would think. That gives you, extra damage. You're going to have the additional defenses from the 100% stat boost, so your attack stat will be able to scale pretty high without even using Triton, and you do have so it's the attack stat you can build on Juggler is very, very high. And again, you're going to run Hellhounds like other fights here. Hellhounds, it will increase the damage that Jormungandr takes, which will help you DPS throughout the fight. And then in terms of equipment, he has this pretty standard setup here, Oath, Last Rites, his helmet. Now, Swordsmith, for obvious reasons, is going to be the best accessory for Juggler on this fight because it makes him immune to fixed damage and increases all his stats. However, you can slap a meditation ring on him if you don't have Swordsmith. It's obviously not as good, but it's something you can run as well. So, the next melee unit I would recommend is Freya. And Freya, I would recommend that you run Barb, Lance Phalanx, and Consecration. Now, Freya's an interesting choice because, you have this boosted defense stat, and every turn the boss increases its stats by 3%. So there's a certain point of the battle, and I don't know when, but there's a certain point, because it is contextual depending on how strong units are, but there is definitely a certain point of the battle where fixed damage is going to out-DPS your DPS because Jormungandr's defense gets too high. So Freya obviously is a very bulky unit as a tank. So there's a certain point of the fight where, her fixed damage is going to start doing a lot more than your other DPS options, and she becomes a pretty decent damage dealer. You have the Consecration for the bonus healing, and you could possibly run Valk, but I think it's probably going to be a lower fixed DPS. And, if you look at the equipment here, you can stack defense this way. You can also stack magic defense and run, either the Swordsmith or Meditation Ring has flat magic defense on it. So it definitely helps, the Valk build potentially be okay. But I think that the Lance class for her is going to be able to stack more defense, which means more DPS. And for those of you who don't know, Swordsmith emblem also has flat defense. So you're getting defense from every source here. I think the Lancer is the way to go. But Freya can be a very, very interesting late round, a pick for the later rounds of the fight when your DPS is starting to lag. Now, the next melee unit I recommend is Clarett. And I would say bring Crush, Blast, and Roar. And, I Ride the Wind is definitely an option, but, you're really not moving around a ton in the fight, so you're not going to be able to take advantage of moving squares to gain the extra damage up. So I don't know if it's a great option here. It's potentially an option. Roar, I would say, is superior to Lightning Flash here just due to the lower cooldown, and it drops attack. And she's an excellent melee option because she has damage reduction in her kit just from her talent alone. She gets the extra damage reduction from Blast. So Clarett is a very, very good option for melee on this fight. But I would recommend that you have her 6 stars if you use her, generally speaking. And in terms of equipment, I'd say, Ragnarok or Throne Guardian, Last Rites for obvious reasons. She gets a lot of damage reducts through everything, and then put Last Rites on top of it. She's very bulky. King's Crown to help buff your team up, and then, I'd recommend an attack accessory, but you can obviously run Swordsmith or Meditation Ring here for the fixed damage immunity. You're going to lower your DPS that way, but it's something that you can definitely consider. Now, the next melee option I'd recommend is Angelina, and I would say bring attack command, defense support, and ram. Now, lightning can be considered as well over ram. Lightning has a higher multiplier, but a longer cooldown, so it kind of depends on what you're going for, but either is an option here. Attack command obviously is excellent for buffing your team, and she has very, very good bulk, so she has the damage redux in her kit as well. And I would recommend the exact same outfit as Clarett. Now, Angie is not going to do quite as much damage as Clarett will do, but she brings the added bonus of having attack command, so Angie is a very, very good pick for this. Next melee option I'd recommend is Kirikaze. And Kirikaze, I would say bring Flash, Deathmatch, and I can't remember what the other passive's called off the top of my head, but it's another 12% attack increase. So he is, the best sex offender on this fight. He has unlimited Flash. So Flash, if you guys don't know, has a 1-turn cooldown, but on his talent, if Kirikaze crits, he will reduce his cooldowns by 1. So he can actually flash, as long as he crits, he can flash every turn, which actually helps his DPS stay very high. The 2 passes, because he only has to run the 1 skill, because he has no cooldowns, running the 2 passes stacks his attack pretty high. And whenever he gets attacked, let's say you're on defense and Jormungandr attacks him, he's going to recover HP as well due to his talent. So he has a lot of potential just to keep up his HP. So he's very self-sufficient. And I'd say run heavy infantry for soldier. Those are probably his best plus attack soldier he has, because they give him 30% attack. And he can be used as a ranged unit, but he's so much weaker, and I don't really see the point, especially because Flash, does not work from range. So there's really no point, in my opinion, running him as a ranged unit. His stats are lower. It just doesn't make sense. And then in terms of equipment, you're going to want to maximize his crit, so that's why you have Demon Slayer, but Dragon Slayer Graham is good as well for the HP. Again, like always, I'm recommending Arcane Battle Guard because, just getting the extra fixed damage proc is better than no fixed damage proc, but Bloodline works here as well. You're going to want to run his Unique Hat so he gets the extra 30% skill. Now, mind you, that only happens at 100% HP, but, that's going to help out for a vast majority of the fight. And then Accessories runs under the same logic as the other melee attackers. Now, next melee option is going to be Leonhardt, and I would say run Air Slash, Sun Slash, and Deathmatch. Now, he's a very bulky attacker, and I'd say run Highland Warriors to increase your bulk more. Leonhardt's not my favorite DPS here, but he can definitely work at a pinch. And again, I would recommend the same options as Kirikaze, but obviously he cannot run the Kirikaze helm, so I would say increase his HP as much as possible, so that's why I'm recommending Aeneas and Chiefs. And Vampire works as well, because the defense drop proc from Vampire can be useful as well. Now, there's a very obvious origin DPS, melee DPS, that I have not mentioned yet, and for a particular reason, because you can use this unit as either a melee or a ranged unit, depending on your team needs, and that is Luna. And so I recommend running her as melee if you can. So because of that, I would say run Wind Spiral, Move Again, and Raging Thunder. Now, obviously, if you're ranged, run Snipe. But Bow, in my opinion, is much weaker, obviously due to the stats. And, the fact that you're probably going to be running Ulers, which decreases the damage, your unit damage. But, if you do need Luna as your second ranged, it's... you kind of have to do what you have to do, so it really depends on your team. She's interesting because she can actually take advantage of the stats from Swordsmith or the Meditation Ring, because they both have magic defense on them, and Luna converts. So that actually makes her a very attractive attacker on this fight. And I'd run Holy Pegs if you're a flyer, or Demon Hunters if you are a bow. And in terms of equipment, because I do recommend flyer over bow, that's why I have the Cursed Lance ahead of Ulers here. Normal armor and helmets for her, and then Swordsmith is by far the best accessory for her, followed by Meditation Ring, then Veil of Light. Veil of Light is going to give you more DPS, but having the fixed immunity, in my opinion, for this fight, and especially because she can use the magic defense that are on these items to her advantage make it much more attractive than Veil of Light for this fight. Alright, so now we're going to get to the other ranged units you can bring, and the first one we're going to cover here is going to be Joshua. And I would say bring Ruthless, Sneak, and Double Tap. So he's extremely bulky because he gets, DR from 2 sources in his skills. He's obviously going to be running Last Rites. You bring Double Tap because what else would you run? The AoEs are not going to be helpful here. His other passives aren't going to be helpful here. So you just bring Double Tap because you might get lucky and get the RNG double hit. So that's better than nothing. And then I'd say Bandits are probably his best soldier because it gives him the attack boost. But, run what you have leveled up high. And then in terms of equipment, pretty standard for a assassin or a bow unit here, with the addition of Swordsmith or Meditation at the end based on the fixed damage immunity. Now, the next range option is Silverwolf, who I'd recommend you bring Ruthless, Cold Blood, and Snipe. Now, Silverwolf is literally just budget Joshua. He's Joshua with less attack and less DR, so I'd recommend the exact same equipment here. So don't run Silverwolf if you have Joshua. Alright, next range option is Lifney. And I'd recommend that you bring Air Slash, the attack support L, and Lightning. Now, Lifney's very interesting because on non-damage turns, she still does damage. Or sorry, non-attacking turns, she still does damage. Sometimes on the fight, the best choice on a turn for a unit might be to wait, because the fixed damage might kill you, the AoE damage might be too great, and you can't heal up back up after. So sometimes, you just need to wait with your units and get the stacks of Venom to go off of you. So on those turns, in Lifney's case, where she has too many stacks of Venom and she can't rest the attack, she can just wait and she still does damage thanks to her bombs. So Lifney is a very interesting option just based on that. The attack support L gives a 15% damage increase to 2 units on your team, so she does have some support utility on this fight. And Meditation Ring is actually awesome for her because it gives flat int and it gives 5% int. So she's definitely the unit on this fight that can utilize Meditation Ring the most to her advantage. Now, in terms of equipment, I would recommend the general mage stuff that I recommend for most fights, with the exception that Meditation Ring is her best in slot by far for this fight, followed by Swordsmith Emblem, and then Dimensional and Eye of the Beholder. So the next range option I'd like to cover is Gerald and Leila. And if you are one of the people, just like on Sleipnir, who have built Gerald and Leila and have them 6-star, you are in luck because they are excellent for this fight. And on this fight, I recommend that you run Holy Word, Move Again, and Attack Command. And I think that they're going to be most effective in the Leila class here. The Gerald class, I think, was more effective in Sleipnir because you need to have the mobility and the ability to move around. But this fight, it's a little bit more, tank and spank. So, you can safely run Leila's class a little bit more effectively here. Obviously, if you do run Gerald and Leila and Angelina, don't bring attack command on both. So, I'd make a decision here on who you'd probably bring it on. I think I would rather bring it on Angelina than Gerald and Leila, but that's just me. You can run a conversion skill instead of either Move Again or Attack Command because, Move Again, the repositioning on this fight isn't the huge thing, but it does give you the damage increase. But, you could run the skill conversion. It kind of depends on, your unique setup. And then in terms of equipment, because I'm recommending the Leila class, it's going to be the general mage recommendations I have for Ancient Call. Now we're going to get to the healers. So the first healer that I'd recommend is TRS. And I would recommend that you bring Heal, Attack, Blessing, and Miracle. Now, you can definitely bring Mass Heal over Attack Blessing if your healing output's too low. And only run Teddy Bear if you have Attack Blessing because having Teddy Bear on for Mass Heal and Miracle, it does nothing. So it's completely useless. And if you really need her to, she can count as a ranged attacker on an even phase turn if you need her to. So let's say, one of your range units dies for some reason before your healer. TRS can definitely chip in damage as a range unit. So just something interesting to consider. And then for equipment recommendations, I have just my standard healer recommendations, a healing staves, Tenyos, and then on this fight, Meditation Ring is definitely the best in slot for the same reasons as Lifney. They can actually use the intelligence from it, then Swordsmith, then Teddy Bear. Alright, so next healer recommendation is Sophia. and I'd recommend that you bring Heal, Mass Heal, and Rewind. So, Rewind is a god tier skill for this fight, especially if you're running someone like Juggler who is changing the tile type below Jorm. Having Rewind definitely makes the fight go a lot simpler in the early rounds and can help you stack up the damage really early. Her talent also will greatly help the healing output and alleviate the pressure on TRS and her healing light for just healing. So, healing light is affected by Sophia's talent, so this really just helps keeps your team topped up. And again, the same recommendations, and I am eschewing Teddy Bear here because she is not bringing a single target heal skill at all, so no point. And then the last recommendation I have for healer here is Close. And I would recommend that you bring Heal, Mass Heal, and Aurora Ring. Now, Aurora Ring, for obvious reasons, it makes you immune to fixed damage. And she is off faction, but she does have Last Rites, and that makes her viable for this fight. Now, you'll notice that I've only made 3 off faction recommendations throughout all 5 videos. The first being Varna on Hugin and Munin, the second being Leona on Sleipnir, and the third now being Close here. And the thing that all 3 of them have in common is that they have a source of damage reduction that helps make up for their lack of stats. So, I would really recommend staying away from any off-faction units on any of the fights unless they have either Last Rites or Shrine Maidens. And then, unlike other places I've recommended Close, I'd say bring a healer staff on here because she is basically only going to be a healer. She's not really attacking. Last Rites instead of Tenyo's because Last Rites she needs a damage reduction. And you could bring Tenyo's headdress, but you could also bring King's Crown to help increase your team's damage and have her be more of a support unit. And then Meditation Ring Swordsmith emblem for obvious reasons. Now, I have a number of units I like a lot less on this fight, and I'll cover them all. So the first one I want to go over is Sherry. Now, Sherry is basically just, crappier Clarett on this fight. Now, if you don't have a melee unit and you need to bring Sherry, she can make do in a pinch. And out of all the units I like a lot less, she's probably the one I like the most, just because I think melee options are potentially limited on this fight. And, Sherry is probably the one that is closest to a unit that I'd recommend on this list here. So, Sherry, I would not recommend her, but if you need a user, you need a user. The next units I like to use a lot less are going to be archers. So, Sigma, Elestrial, Narm. Now, Sigma is probably the best out of them because he has damage reduction in his kit. Elestrial has damage reduction too through Holy Pegs. Narm doesn't have any. They can all wear rights, but I just think that the other ranged options are infinitely superior and can do more damage, so I just like them a lot more. So I would try to stay away from archers. Now, if you're on a budget, Narm might be a great pick because you can run Narm on 3 fights if you are really stretched on resources. So if resources are a problem, Narm becomes much more interesting, but if you can, I would try to stay away from these 3. The next units I like a lot less are going to be Zerida, Diehard, Omega. So any of these assassins that, do a ton of damage and kind of the OHKO type assassins are not people I would recommend because they have a high burst, but then, nothing. So, I think that the other ranged units are going to be much more beneficial throughout this fight, and these high burst assassins, this fight does not lend well to their kits, so I would keep them on the bench. And then the last unit I like a lot less is Lewin. Now, Lewin does have some interesting potential because if you rig it up right, you can get his talent to stack twice and get his attack up pretty high. I just feel like he's a worth Kirikaze here because Kirikaze is able to spam his active skill over and over again. He has self-sustain. Kirikaze is basically guaranteed to crit. So, Kirikaze I think is probably going to outdamage Lewin over the fight, even though that Lewin might be able to get slightly higher attack. So, Kirikaze also has like 100 more base attack. Like the stat difference between an SR and an R is gigantic. So, if you're thinking, hey, Lewin gets 2 stacks of his attack, the 100% attack is very good here. I'm very dubious, so I would try to stay away from Lewin here. So these are the units I like a lot less for this fight. So, but you know, out of the 8 I have here, I would say the most usable are Sherry and Narm, but only if you're honest on a very very tight budget. So in terms of my team, the team I'm going to use for this fight, I'm going to be bringing Juggler and Luna as my 2 melee attackers. For my range, I'm going to be bringing Joshua and Liffany. And for my healer and flex, it's going to be 2 healers. I'm going to be bringing Tiaris and Sophia. So the interesting thing about this team comp is that I can actually run 5 sources of fixed damage immunity. So Juggler, I'm going to be putting a Swordsmith emblem on. But Luna, Liffany, Tiaris, and Sophia all will have meditation rings on them. So I don't actually have to run Great Dragon Barrier. So this makes it very interesting for me because that opens up Juggler to run Beast Shock for DPS. And Joshua might not have the immunity here, but he's going to be able to be pretty bulky through his kit. So I trust that Joshua will be fine, but it'll be an interesting run for me. And Jorm is definitely a fight that I am looking forward to doing. So that's it for the video today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. As always, if you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate if you hit the like button and subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so you can get notified when I do more videos like this. And as always, if there's anything that you'd like to discuss in this video, any about this fight, any questions you might have, comments, concerns, whatever, please let me know in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys again soon.